all. I would like to welcome today's research person, Dr. Angelina Barto, David Scott Caston, Professor of English Literature, Scott of Liberal Arts and Humanities, Vauxhall University, Hyderabad, India. Ma'am, over to you, ma'am.
Oh, okay. So thank you. First of all, I would like to congratulate all all at Anna Velankanai College and Cape Comorin Trust for conducting this international conference on language, literature, and social science. And I thank all the dignitaries, faculty members, and students who are present for this talk. I also thank Dr. Shaileja Vasudeva for giving me this opportunity to interact with you all. So can I share my screen, ma'am?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is the screen visible?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. It's visible.
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah, ma'am.
So today my topic is titled Reading Etched Politics, Analyzing Indian Political History as Represented Through Graphic Narratives. And what I'm basically going to do is showcase how political history is represented in graphic literature and what narratives, written only writing cannot capture, it can be captured by the images. So, to give you a brief overview of the talk, I'll be talking firstly about the aims and objectives. Then I'll move on to give you a brief introduction on what are graphic narratives. Many of you would be familiar with graphic narratives. Many of you might not be. So I'll give you an introduction, and then I'll showcase, how to make a graphic turn in Indian writing in English. When did this turn happen? When did writers in India start writing graphic narratives and on political events in India? And then I will talk about representation of sociopolitics and graphic narratives. And I'll be focusing on three primary factors. One is decentering, the center of political history, synthesis of the public private spheres of political history, and sociopolitics of history through satire. So, aims and objectives. So, the aim of this paper is to explore how, through the juxtaposition of images and words, India's socio-political events have been represented through the frame of graphic narratives. So, we will be studying the images as well as the words in the graphic text to make meaning and to observe how politics is represented in graphic literature. And the other objectives is to canvas how graphic narratives aspire to portray the political history from below. What I mean to say here is, by to use Derrida's concept, is that you need to understand political history beyond what is represented in the history books, because history books is very selective. History books is written by the victorious. We want to read a history, or we want to read a political history that is written from below, that is written by the commoners, that is written by the common people, the marginalized people. And second is to peruse how graphic narratives are moving towards being an integral part of Indian writing in English in the post-independent era. Okay. So what are graphic narratives? It can be perceived as a medium that, fuses words and images to represent the world around. So there will be images and words. It looks like comics, but it's not so much like comics, because it deals with very, 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 very heavy subjects. Think about Holocaust, think about partition, think about the Armenian genocide. These are very, very serious subjects, very heavy subjects. And when you think about it, these subjects are being dealt in the graphic literature. And you might ask that, such, you might criticize and you might critique and say, why are such intense experiences being represented through this mode of images and arts? Well, because often when words fail, images can come and fill the gaps, where words fall short. For instance, this is why Orwell writes in 1992, graphic narratives embody a seriousness of purpose that goes against the essential lightness of the cartoon mode. So you think comics, you think when you read when you have the first look at a graphic narrative, you think, oh, it's similar to what I read, it's similar to comics, but it's not. It's very intense. You have to read it with a lot of focus. For instance, and this term was coined by Will Eisner in 1961, and initially, the term graphic novel was used to refer to very expensive comics books. But with the publication of Moss, which is a graphic novel on Holocaust, on the experiences of Holocaust, by Art Spiegelman, and especially after it won the Pulitzer Prize, the graphic novels began to be taken very seriously, and even in India, we had a lot of important writers who were engaging in with this medium to express their political, socio-political opinions. So the graphic novel is an idea and a publishing phenomenon has endured and has had a significant impact in comics, literature, films, and many other media. So what is happening is Gen Z, most of the students here would be from Generation Z, and you need a lot of stimulation. For instance, you like images, you are more intrigued by audiovisual, modes of education. So when there is, this image on the text, it keeps your focus because you have a focus span of 6 seconds. So graphic novels are very helpful, and in abroad especially, graphic novels are used to teach history. For instance, there was this huge debate in America about teaching Holocaust through this graphic novel Moss. Okay, and because of its popularity today, the graphic novel has escaped the cultural exclusion of much of the comics universe, because there is this notion that comics is only for children, it's amateurish genre, it's only for entertainment. This notion has been able to be thwarted because of the prominence of graphic novels. Okay. So what is graphic language? So graphic language is basically, when I talk about reading the graphic language, I'm asking you to read the images as well as the text in interconnection. Don't read them in isolation, in interconnection. And why is it significant? Why is this genre so significant? Because it's challenging the way we define literature. Think about Bob Dylan winning Nobel Prize for writing songs. So these are challenging the way we think and define literature. And similarly, when Morse wins the Pulitzer Prize, it kind of questions, it kind of expands the parameters of literature itself. So this is the significance of graphic narratives. So now to talk about the graphic turn in Indian writing in English, and I was wondering if any of you want to jump in and say, do you think that the graphic turn in India, is it a revival or is it a literary development of contemporary times? Does anyone want to interact once? Hello. Okay, so yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
I was wondering if any student wants to interact and say, if whether this graphic turn in Indian writing in English is a revival or, a literary development of contemporary times. Okay, I'll talk. No problem. So, what happens is there's this lot of debate that goes on, that it's literary development of postmodernism is a postmodern development, but a lot of critics like Pramod Kinaya, he was my professor again, and he is one of the pivotal figures in talking about graphic literature in India. So he says that it's not actually it's not a new postmodernish development. It's a revival, because we have been having Amar Chitra Katha, we have been having Chandamama. And if you look at these texts, Chandamama, Amar Chitra Katha, they were dealing with mythologies. They were talking about often the social problems in our society, caste system, in very indirect way, but they were talking. And Chandamama has been published since 1947, since our independence. So what many critics say is that this is not a postmodernist development in India. It's just that it's a literary revival of this Chandamama and Amar Chitra Katha. And the first graphic novel that was written in India is Arijit Sen's The River of Stories. It is very politically charged. It was on the construction of the Narmada Dam, and it talked about the suffering of the people, the common people, the local people of the area, and with the construction of the dam and how it affected the environment. So Pramod Kinar tries to say that in this genre is a very, very important genre in Indian writing in English, and he's trying to say that it possesses all the qualities of a literary text. It is no different from a literary text, except that it also has images for you to interpret. So in a way, if you take my opinion, it just makes the text more interesting. So the Indian graphic novel, from its very inception, has manifested an inclination to bring to the surface issues underreported in conventional news media or conventional sociopolitics or conventional history. And this is where the significance of Indian graphic novel lies. So what you don't get to read in the newspapers, what you don't get to read in the history books, is what you get to read in the graphic literature, in graphic novels. So again, the modern Indian graphic novels is radically repositioning the medium. The medium itself is undergoing a shift at the hands of Indian graphic novels. So what Indian graphic novelists are doing is they're, using Indian art forms. Think about a graphic novel like Bhimayana. Many of you might be aware of it. It is on the life of, B.R. Ambedkar, and it's immensely popular. And if you see the artwork itself is very Indian. It's by the Gond tribe. So, using Indian artwork to tell an Indian story. So we are Indianizing this entire, graphic narrative, and it's very powerful what we are doing with graphic literature. So now the question arises, why explore India's political events through graphic literature? Because a graphic literature goes beyond representing numbers, facts, and figures. Very important because, excuse me, Indian graphic, when you think about history, when you think about socio-political history, you get a lot of numbers, facts, and figures. You get statistics, data, but you don't get individual stories. You don't get the story of the common people. You probably know what happened to, say, Jawaharlal Nehru, but you don't know about during partition. You know about, but you do not know about the common people who were struggling. Individual stories. It's only very recently that a few projects are coming up and they're documenting individual experiences of history. It's a very recent phenomenon, but it's mostly about numbers, facts, and figures. Secondly, it goes beyond representing gory political histories, but also human history. So what gets documented in history books is generally, how many people were killed, how many people were displaced, how many people were, sexually abused. But individual narratives don't get portrayed. Individual socio-political events don't get programmed. The impact of socio-political events on individuals don't get portrayed. And this is where again graphic narratives comes in. And it aspires to help the reader reimagine through the visual aspects of the text. Okay, so because you have the images, you get a chance to reimagine this entire situation, the entire story, through the author, through the writers, through the creators, and it's a very, 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 very emotional and powerful experience. And it demands greater interaction and attention from the reader. So it holds your attention and also asks you to read, because when you're reading a graphic literature, I'll giving you examples also. You'll be reading the images as well as the words. So you're reading in combination. So you have to focus a lot when you want to interpret this text. Now we move on to, one of the parameters of representation of, political history. So how is, political history represented? And one of the tactics is by decentering. And what do I mean by, decentering? And I'm evoking Derrida here. India's graphic narratives as having displaced a recurring tendency to disclose hidden political histories or thwarted histories. And what I mean by this, whatever is not represented in the history books is showcased in the stories. For instance, individual histories, okay, and to subvert established histories or officially documented histories. Sometimes the documented histories are or often manipulated histories, and in literature you get these scope of understanding history from the other side, and also produce counter narratives. Suppose there is a I'll give you examples of all these parameters. And it engages in narrating politics from beyond by portraying the pangs of the marginalized. This is very important because the marginalized is not always heard, but through literature, through graphic narratives, we can hear the voices of the marginalized. We can see the role of the marginalized. So now I'll show you an example for where hidden histories of or political histories are showcased in graphic literature. So these are two pages, and you read from top to bottom. Top to bottom is there are two pages: first page, one page, and second page. So in the first panel of the first page, you can see people. There are a lot of commoners who are saying things, but their voices, the speech bubbles, are empty because their voices are not being heard. And the kings, and the next the panel reads, the king's courtiers interpreted for the king. They wrote down the crowd's complaints in convoluted petitions full of legalese. So they were kind of, whatever the commoners were saying, they were not representing. And these are who are the king's courtiers? These are the East India Company, the people from East India Company were representing the King of England, that is George VI, during the rule of during the rule of British, during the independence, during India's independence, 1947. And what did they write? What did these, how these men manipulate the truth? How these kings men manipulate the truth? So they write that the gist of the petitions did not generally tally, and they wrote that the saffron crowd wanted my son to be promoted. This is how they manipulated. The green crowd wants you to invest in my business. So they made it. Whatever the commoners were saying, they did not actually portray to the king. They said what they wanted, that the green crowd wants you to invest in my business, and both the crowds wants you to order a perpetual scholarship at Oxford for my family. So you can see how they are manipulating history. Okay, and this through literature, it is you're getting to see the thwarted history that disclose the hidden histories. So next example is centering the marginalized through the graphic narrative. So this is another story on, the Barn Owl's one. This is from Barn Owl's Wanderer's Capers. And the story is called The Dark Armpits of History, where, it's a very post-colonial story. And these are all peoples that are represented, that represented, workers who were working under the British rule. You must know that, when the colonizers were here, when the British officers were here, each officers had minimum 25 people to serve them, to attend to them. And they were chubedars, jamadars, cleaners, kidmugdars, waiters, paymasters, okay, cobblers. So, they don't get representation in history. But in this book, in this story, we have this entire page devoted to them, representing their role. I will give you another example. So here, what is happening is from the same story. There is this man called Francis in the lower panel, you can see, and Mr. Philip Francis, and he's in love, and he's just trying to have a duet with another man for the love of a lady. And you can see he is engaged in very trivial things. He should be working for the East India Company, but he's engaging in very trivial things. The real people that are working are this marginalized people, the fan bearers, the waiters. So this is how they are showcasing subverting the factual politics. Okay, So I'll give you another example, counter narrative. So this is another story on partition, post-partition. So this is from this side, that side by Vishwajyoti Ghosh, where there is this lady, who makes a life for herself, even in a refugee camp, and moves out of the refugee camp. And through this story, the writer is trying to, the creators and the writers are trying to showcase that a single more woman can survive no matter what. A single woman can build herself, rebuild herself, because in history you have this data. Even there are 2-3 articles there that talk about how women were not able to adjust during the partition. Men and children were men were more more resilient in bearing the effects of the partition, and women were very vulnerable. But a lot of personal experiences, personal documentation will show that it's not so. There were a lot of women, and when I'm talking about this story, I'm talking about the Bengal side of the partition. There were a lot of women who actually made a life for themselves, even doing whatever, but somehow surviving and narrative that showcases that counters the dominant narrative that women were very vulnerable, and they could not adjust to the change during the partition. And it also counters the criticism of refugees, because there is this criticism of refugees always perpetuated, that they like to feed on government money, they don't want to work. But this woman, she's trying to work on her own. She doesn't require, she doesn't want the government support. So this is a very, very interesting story regarding countering the political history, the established political history. Next point is synthesis of the public and private spheres of history. So we know that the public and private spheres of our lives, think about the public and private spheres of our lives, they are always in a state of flux. They are, always together. You cannot separate them. You cannot talk about each of it in isolation. But what happens in history books is that they only talk about the public life. Now, think about an example. Let me give you an example. So many of you have come to your college today, I believe, and you are to present a paper. And suppose there was a strike and you could not come to the college. So what will get documented in the history books or in the newspapers as facts, or in the history books, is that how many what one political party said, and how other party refuted what leaders did, how many buses were burned, and God forbid if anyone was killed. These are the things that gets documented. But how it affected you, that you were to present a paper at a conference, international conference, but you're not being able to do that, that will not get documented in, say, newspapers, or it will not go down in history. But think about it, how it affected you personally. It is going to affect you. Maybe you were to submit your PhD thesis, and this paper presentation was very important for you, and just because you couldn't present this paper, you maybe got delayed by 6 months. So this is why this history doesn't get documented. So literature, or graphic literature, gives you scope to document such personal histories, and personal as well as political histories. And this is where their significance lies. You're capturing both the public and private histories. So public and private spheres of life are inseparable in reality. They interact in the real world, are in a state of flux. Excuse me. And they create a fusion of the two spaces that allows for the realistic representation of sociopolitical history. And think about it, because reality is always in a state of flux. Real life is always in a state of flux. So it's very important that we represent reality, and we represent it by showcasing both the public and the private spheres of history. And as I always, as also stated by Gravett, that macrocosms cannot be talked about without delving into the microcosms. So if you want to talk about the bigger spheres, you cannot dismiss the microcosms. You cannot talk about the individual stories. So I'll just give you an instance here. So this is an example taken from a graphic narrative Nelly Kam by Vishwajyoti Ghosh on emergency. So you all, I think, are familiar with the emergency, what happened during emergency, and what happened. What is happening in this book? If you can read, you can see that through the first panel, you can see the radio, and it's saying that the president has proclaimed emergency. There is nothing to panic about, and you can see that there are questions all over. The person is listening to the radio and is totally confused because it comes all of a sudden, right? And then the radio reads, this was necessary response to the deep and widespread conspiracy which has been brewing ever since I began to introduce certain progressive measures to benefit the common man and woman of India. And you can see the man is all alert, okay? And behind him, you can see a picture of Che Guevara. So you can understand that he comes from the leftist ideology. So without even talking about the leftist ideology, they're showcasing, the man's political affiliation, and what kind of, and his reactions, through his eyes, through his expressions, you can get that he's totally shocked. And so you're getting a mix of public and private history, public through the radio and private through the man's expressions. And he says, is this really necessary? Is this? And, there is pause. And why did this have to happen now? Politics, political issues apart, forget about my ideological quotient, my dreams for the nation. I now face a bigger crisis. It's the end of the month, bloody hell, my salary. So this is June 26th, and you can see the calendar date, June 26, 1975. So you can understand, how they're trying to showcase how individual lives are affected by the sudden declaration of emergency, because maybe at a broader scale, of course, it jarred the nation, but individual scale, he's thinking about a salary, because without that, he will not be able to tend to his family, tend to himself. So this is how public and private spheres of histories are showcased. Let me give you another example, again from Bhimayana, and I think you might really many of you might be familiar with the text. So through this biographical text, we get to see the social scenario. We get exposed to the horrors. Rather, I like to use the word horrors of the caste system across through Ambedkar's life. Again, there is another graphic novel on the life of Bhagat Singh in Kulab Zindabad, and through his life stories is being said, his life personal experiences being narrated, and the entire scenario, how prisoners were treated by the Britishers, how nationalists were treated by the Britishers. It's very gory, it's very painful. So it's again how personal and private social histories are social and political histories are showcased to us. This is, again, I just wanted to show you the artwork of Bhimayana. See, this is entirely done in Gond art form. It's very interesting. If you see how Durgabai and Subhash Vyam, entirely they conceptualize this entire graphic novel through this Gond, this tribal art form. Such a beautiful tribute to B.R. Ambedkar, because he talked about he talked for the tribes, he talked for the Dalits, he talked for the marginalized. So it's a beautiful tribute. And again, through this life, through this portrayal, he's showcasing how cart drivers were not willing to actually take Ambedkar in their cart to where he was going, and it showcases how because they will be polluted. That is the reason, and they were also charging double the fare. So moving on to the next example. So representation of sociopolitics through the frame of satire. Now, this is another parameter. So a satire can be used very interestingly to depict sociopolitical biases. For instance, graphic satire has been adopted as a mode to represent the defects of an individual or a society, or used as a trope to depict the follies of individual and society at large. and not only displays the follies of political systems, but also exposes social, economic, and cultural drawbacks of the established narratives about the national past. So through satire, through irony, you can showcase the problems of a society. Often, think about the political cartoons that are made about, say, Boris Johnson, about Trump, or say Mamata Banerjee, or Modi for that matter. So they all are trying, because if you write something, you might be charged with sedition, or given the any kind of uh, any kind of legal actions might be taken about you. But when you do it through humor, yes, of course, of course there are cases where actions have been taken even when you do it through humor. But still, there are chances that it might be ignored. So a lot of people, a lot of social activists engage in showcasing, portraying their displeasure through the frame of satire. And often the brutalities of historical events is best revealed through irony, because it's so dark that if it's depicted on the pages, it doesn't always, it's very jarring. So when you do it through satire, when you do it through a ironical laugh, through a sarcastic laugh, it often hits hard. It often hits hard on the audience and on the reader. So for example, I just want to show you one example from about the Naxalite revolution. So many of you might be familiar with the Nakshal Revolution. So what is it? It's basically a revolution where the peasants were revolting against exploitation. It began in Nakshal region of West Bengal, and it's spread all across India. And this is from the text called Amar Bari Tomar Bari Nakshal Bari, which roughly translate as, this was the slogan of the Nakshalites. Okay, so it translates as your house, my house, Nakshalbari. Okay, and yeah, just look at the image. You can see the zamindar comfortably sitting under an umbrella with a hookah, and you can see the family of the farmer. The farmer is toiling, and including his family is toiling, and you can see the woman in a very pathetic state. She's almost on tears, and you can see the next part. You can see that the man, the zamindar, comfortably under the umbrella is saying, "This is for me." So he takes the bulk of the share of crops, and this is for you. He gives only a handful to the present. So you can understand the amount of exploitation that was happening that time. And you can see that it's very contemporary. So there are contemporary use of phrases, and he's very shocked to see that he was given so little. And if you can see the image properly, there is this shock in his eyes, and you can see his eyes are red, and there is a symbol of the Communist Party, that sickle. So you can see that now he's ready. He's ready for revolution, because he sees that he's being exploited beyond his point. His family is suffering. So this is a trope of contrast. So this trope of contrast is being used to highlight the irony. And even though it seems when he's giving, "This is for you," you might, there might be ironical laugh at your face, but you understand the pain behind, right? And you can see that that the rope, many farmers, there's a rope that is separating the panels. And it's very interesting that the artist uses a rope, because many of the farmers had committed suicide due to hunger. So before the Nakshal revolution. So so this is the rope, the nose, and you can see at the end that it's on fire. So the revolution is taking place. So there, the what you get to see is that there is this vast disparity between wealth and poverty, between the exploitative zamindars and between the exploited farmers. And the contrast is meant to direct us to two Indias. This is what Nair observes: one belonging to the political fundamentalist, wealth and immoral people, and one belonging to the poor, honest, low caste minority people. I wanted to give you another example. So this is portraying the emergency. So this is 1976, and you can see how Indira Gandhi has been represented. This is a caricature of her. So she says, "Welcome to crazy land," and you can see her eyes. It's absolute depiction of crazies, of lunacy. Okay, and you can see with her hands, with her arms, she's strangling the judiciary, she's strangling the media, she's strangling the administration. So all the different branches of a democracy is being squashed, is being thwarted. Okay, and you can see how you remember he's there's on top, if you can see, he's running with an injection behind the man, because there's this mass sterilization going on. Men are being forcibly sterilized, and there was this initiative, people's car banaunga mein. It's written in Hindi, but they're trying to make it a very very Indian novel by including words that are also from different languages. So this no this graphic narrative, Amar Bari Tomar Bari Nakshal Bari, has a lot of languages in it. Which is very interesting, because it's very is quintessentially Indian, because when we talk, we generally either talk English or Benglish, or we talk Hing Benglish, or we mix up languages for that matter. And this showcases the madness of the madness or the absolute collapse of democracy during the emergency. To give you another example, this is another, during the during the emergency. So you can see there is this smile, but smile in the face, again the depiction of Indira Gandhi, with folded hands, just like politicians do. And there is a smile in the corner, you can see, it's almost like as though she's wearing a mask. So this hypocrisy and is also there, and she's saying, "Join the smiling saviors." Okay, so these showcases, these are ironical, the sarcastic caricatures of
Hello. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much. It was really informative. And I hope all the research scholars, paper presenters, and the students might have been really benefited by this session. Anyone who has any queries?
hello.